Roll intro video.
Steven Show. He talks about stuff. His name is Steven. Steven Show.
You went straight into Game Changers for a moment.
Oh yeah, exactly.
My gosh,
always on my mind.
Oh man, Corey Dresser.
That's me. I'm that
Corey Dresser, Vanguard Conk.
Yeah.
How are you?
I am alive and kicking. I just slept way too much in the middle of the day, and now I'm going to feel the repercussions of that tonight. So
I have barely slept in the last 48 hours, and I'm already dealing with the repercussions of that. So
really? I'm just going to see what I look like in 48 hours. This will be cool.
I keep planning stuff out, and then I'm just like not sleeping well as well, and then like work, and I'm just I'm all over the place. So Corey,
yes,
for those of us who do not know, could you share a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I have a lot to share. I'm not a small man. There's plenty to eat. I could definitely feed the Donner Potty solo, with some leftovers. Yeah, so my name's Corey. I am 30 last time I checked. I grew up with a lot of family everywhere all the time. My family has a very long series of divorces and remarriages, so I have like half brothers and step brothers and like great grandma's uncles, nephews, roommates, stepson. So I have a very diverse legal family, as you will, and that's just how most I've defined myself a lot of the time for family wise is like I have so many in like law-based family relationships it's hard to keep track anymore. But that's how I got raised, and it's good fun. You still have your core, I guess blood family, but it's spread out there.
All right, so when you say spread out, I mean like everywhere, or
yeah, kind of. Mostly I have like 7 siblings, and only one of them is biologically related. The rest are all adopted or through legal means. So,
gotcha.
And that's just kind of a theme in every branch of the family hierarchy with aunts, uncles, stepdads, stepmoms, grandparents. So each one of those just branches a lot everywhere. So I have a significant amount of legal family and a very tiny amount of biological family.
That sounds like that would get really complicated.
Oh, it is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, my mother has been married 5 times to 3 people. So you feel free to do that math. Yeah.
Cool.
So I've had a very interesting life when it comes to the family side. It's definitely not a cookie cutter in any sense. Your cookies are messed up if you use this cutter.
Well, I'll leave all the that to you. I don't do much baking myself. I'm just not there.
Okay. I'm more of a taste tester, but yeah, it is what it is.
So out of curiosity, how would you say that has, I don't know, shaped you like growing up? How has that brought you from where you were in this wild, crazy, all over the place family to who you are now? Or do you think it has any impact at all?
I don't know. I feel like it's kind of pushed me to both extremes in that, and both extremes of the version of the nuclear family doesn't matter that much. In that, oh look, I have all this legal family that I usually connect with just as much as my my biological family. In addition to just family in general, like is not necessarily that big of a deal. So I feel like most people are like, oh, your nuclear family's your nuclear family, but this has exploded and imploded 700 times. So now I'm over here and over here on the family situation. And I think it's been a very interesting mindset to transition into really all facets of life. being able to see like just because something's called something doesn't mean it is something.
So did you hear a lot growing up about how like you basically had to create and develop your own nuclear family, like at some
Yeah,
point? Because I heard that a lot. It's like you're gonna have to go like go out there, get married, have kids, have a career, raise them, get them through college, and have it done all over again.
yeah,
So did you
yeah,
hear that a lot growing up? And like, what did that like? Did that like just feel like weird to you to hear? Or I mean, because like
yeah.
you obviously didn't really live in that kind of a situation, so
Yeah, that whole American dream of having 2.5 kids and a white picket fence kind of thing, and
yeah.
that your nuclear family is your family. I just think I don't know. I heard it a lot, and I hear it a lot more than normal people because now I have 5 grandmas asking for grandparents and like some moms and stepmoms asking for grandkids and all this yada yada. So it's the same kind of pressure, but from a bunch of different voices all over the country. And after a while, you get really used to rejecting that notion, right? I get more
Yeah.
practice rejecting that than the average person. So yeah, I think just evangelical Christian and really Christian in general, because Catholics and Eastern Orthodox kind of like this stuff too. Of have your 2.5 kids, and that's what with one wife in a house, and that's your duty to God. And it gets the more often I have to repeat no, the easier it gets, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. So you would yeah, I resonate with that so much. Like just looking at my own family and how I grew up, I'm just like, no, I don't want I don't want this. This is I think something's broken somewhere
Mhm,
along the line because they keep telling me to do something that feels so very toxic. And I'm just like, yeah. I just
mhm.
no, it's just mine didn't work out so great. Of course, my mom was divorced twice. I have a stepsister um, who's been divorced twice, and
Oh yeah.
now that I think about it, my grandmother was divorced twice, or yeah, twice, and yeah, it's just it's an ongoing thing. I'm like, well, we keep pushing this. Clearly, we're missing something here. Something's not working. So
Hmm. Yeah, I think it's a. I mean, I'm no historian scholar, but I think a lot of it comes back to the idea of industry, where like I think that's where we see more proponent. The dad goes to work at the factory or now the cubicle mill, right? And then the mom either does her thing or stays home with the kids. And like that was the foundation for industrial life, I think, for like, 50, 100 years. And then we just keep trying to force that mold because
yeah,
I mean, the household and the idea of like the patriarchal dad, like that usually applied to like hundreds of people across generations, if you're looking at like Old Testament times or things like that. And somehow we've tried to force that flavoring and like smack that onto you, your wife, and your 2.5 kids, right? That's the American dream. But I mean, it doesn't really translate well. I mean, old time families in the Old Testament was more like a business because you had whatever the main dad is, and then his wives, and then his concubines were also part of it, and then all of his sons and daughters, and then all of their servants and employees, and then all of them. And so it wasn't these 5 people; it was these 200 people. That was your household, right?
have you ever seen the Betty Bowers video for what a biblical marriage is?
No, I don't think I have, but
Oh
I'd
my
be
god,
curious
yeah,
to
you need
see.
to look that up because that is hilarious. I'm definitely going to send it to you because she just starts going into it. It's like, well, a biblical marriage is one man and one wife and 500 concubines and
As the
uh,
Lord
10
intended.
whores, and and then it was like this long drawn out thing of like all the different pairings up that you got in the Old Testament and New Testament. Um, just but a man to man, no. No, it's one man, one woman, his 500 concubines, his 500 slaves, and then these whores. And it was just, it's crazy. Uh, yeah, I think it's fascinating that we hold on to we hold on so desperately to these old systems, like, where you're saying force the mold,
Mm-hmm.
that, you know, to some degree, yeah, may have worked at some point, but it's I don't think anything has worked perfectly. And
Mm-hmm.
then to realize that life is changing, the world is changing. There's this crazy amount of technology now. The whole, like, so much is different than it was even 50 years ago. Then like the mold has to change. So
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I don't know. I feel like it was even created artificially at the beginning because the nuclear family benefits the factory. It doesn't necessarily benefit the family.
how so?
Um, well, I mean, the absentee father that's gone for 8 or 10 hours a day doing his cubicle job or his labor job, like, and he becomes the sole breadwinner, and his job is dedicated to this one company for 50 years,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
That benefits them, and when they have kids, then those kids are probably going to usually do similar work their dad does, and now they have a they essentially have a puppy mill
mhm,
for coworkers.
yeah,
And so I think the our idea of the nuclear family was mostly to benefit industry and um, now cubicles, which
mm.
thankfully are slowly dying off. So that's a good thing, and we'll see where that takes us.
Yeah, because the way that we understand work weeks now is not what work weeks have always been.
Yeah.
Nowadays, we're pushing this whole 40-hour work week thing, which I think is unhealthy
Hmm.
uh, for everybody, psychologically, emotionally, physically. I don't think it's healthy, but it hasn't always been that way. I mean, there was times where, back when it was mostly farmers, where
Hmm.
you had these groups who would go out and farm early in the morning, like way early in the morning, take this huge break during the day to have like their large meal and just to relax, cool down, avoid the sun, and then go back and work some more, and then party at night. But
Yeah.
uh, it wasn't what we think of when we think of a full work week. And so like I feel like what we have now with this nuclear family thing are really strong expectations for how we're
Mhm.
going to develop and live our lives, as well as um, the work expectations that are extremely unhealthy, and you're just kind of pushed into it. What was that term in Dimension 20? Damn the Puritan work ethic.
Oh, yeah,
uh,
that makes sense. Yeah, it checks
uh,
out.
yeah. There's somewhere along the line, I feel like we derailed somewhere,
Mhm.
and I don't know. What are your thoughts?
Oh boy, I have a lot of rants about the idea of technology in general, but I
Hmm.
will try to keep it brief, which might not be possible. So get ready. Um,
I'm ready.
I ascribe. I can't remember who said it originally. It might be an author I know, Aaron Clary. He might have said it originally, but we are essentially, how I see it, we are polar bears in a jungle exhibit, right?
Mm,
and
okay.
and that's kind of, you would think, oh, if you could choose to live in the jungle or the Antarctic, in general, most people will pick the jungle because there's a lot more resources and food. Sure, there's other things
Sure.
in there and problems. There's no poisonous snakes in Antarctica, as far as we know.
As
But
far as we know.
for the most part, Antarctica is pretty scarce, right? You have to be
Yeah.
specifically designed for that. If you put it in the jungle, sure, the polar bear have way more food, but he's also not made for that, right? He's probably going to be constantly physically and mentally and emotionally stressed the whole time. But it's not obvious at first because you're like, hey, this guy's surrounded by food and hanging out and nice warm sun. Why is this guy complaining? This polar bear. It's like, well, he wasn't made for that. And that's kind of how I see us humans involved, especially with like high-end technology, social media, constant movies, things, constant supplies of food that we didn't have to go hunt and gather, right? We're essentially
Yeah.
polar bears in a jungle exhibit. A lot of our life is supposed to be effort, and we've streamlined our lives to be relatively effortless compared to our ancestors, that it's actually creating new problems.
Hmm.
Does that make sense?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like, there was like some old studies of what makes humans the most happy. And apparently it was having a goal that's hard but achievable and then achieving it. But the more convenient our technology gets, though, a lot harder it is to do those things.
Mm.
Because if everything becomes button pushes, there's no fulfillment in there, and that in itself can exude its own problems because that makes humans less happy, even though it's easier and comfier.
You know, yeah, to some degree, it feels like we're living in this world of two extremes, where
Mhm.
either you're living without challenge or you're living with something that's not achievable. Like
Mhm.
like you're talking about the button pushing thing, like there's no real challenge to that. Um, but in some ways, our culture pushes us to have standards to like establish goals that are unachievable or to set standards for ourselves that are unachievable. Like
Mhm.
personally, I think that's where I often find myself in that place where I set myself a goal or a standard that is just overreaching
Yeah.
and then I can't accomplish it. And so I'm caught in this constant loop of self-defeat because I keep putting myself in a situation where I am doomed to fail
Mhm.
because apparently I can't put 80 hours worth of stuff into a single week. Just not
Yeah.
capable. Because I'm like
Understandable.
that need to be Superman, you know? I think that is a cultural thing that we deal with while at the same time having the inverse in our way.
Mhm. Yeah, I can definitely feel that too. Where like, and I think a lot of it comes back to kind of that social media element because we see everybody else's successes. You know that
Yeah.
I'm sure you've heard that phrase. You know, everybody's always comparing everyone else's highlight reel to your behind the scenes,
Yeah.
and it forces you like everybody knows. You know, keeping up with the Joneses is stupid, but we all still do it, right? And it might
Yeah.
not necessarily be, oh, I want to get a Corvette. It could still be like, oh, I want to be productive like that. I want to start a side business. I want to do
Yeah.
this because I
Yeah.
saw 2,000 other people do it on Instagram and they got 1,000 likes, right?
I just it's just last week I was lamenting that um to a friend that I was like 2020 is over and there are these I mean thank God, but there were all these creatives out there who got locked up in quarantine, who got stuck and so they just went and learned something new, or they went and applied something. They made an online business. I've been getting these ads from bnh.com, which is a camera and photos like company up in New York. So you can get like cameras and all sorts of crazy stuff from them. And the advertisement has been this guy named Josh who moved from Atlanta to New York literally the week before quarantine started.
Oh,
So he bought all this equipment from B&H and he started a online fitness class and
wow.
he just set up a studio in his room. He's got his bike, he's got all this stuff, he's got all these videos and so he's just doing all this from your home type stuff and I'm like the hell? Who had
Yeah.
the energy to do that? I was just trying to keep myself going. I was like fighting off depression and anxiety. This guy's over here doing a fitness class from his home and making bank. And all this other stuff where there's people who were like they thrived in that. They were able to like rise to meet that and I was tearing myself apart because I don't have that kind of personality and I wasn't
Mm.
able to make that happen.
Yeah.
It's that compare and contrast where I'm like, you know what? We are completely different people. They
Mhm.
have completely different resources. I ended up working 50 hours a week with my job
Mm.
because working at a water bottling company is apparently a lucrative thing in the middle of a crisis.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
while also working on my master's, but I was like, well, I'm like an idiot for not having more done. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's crazy. Yeah. It's weird when we play that comparison game, right? Because everybody knows, and I'm sure you've heard this all the time, like from self-help gurus, you should only compare yourself to yourself yesterday, right? And I think there's some
I haven't heard that. I could have gone without hearing that. Thank
oh
you.
yeah. Yeah, don't compare yourself with your neighbor, compare yourself with yourself yesterday. And I mean, there's probably some wisdom in that for like
Sure.
normies, I guess, but who are just starting, maybe that helps. But to me, it's not a long term realistic goal because I don't think we're ever going to get rid of that comparison bug. right? It's
Also,
kind of in our
what if
biology.
I was more productive yesterday? Like,
Yeah.
well, F.
Yeah. I changed my socks today and I didn't yesterday. That's a win. That's a win. Strictly W's from here on out. Yeah. But I don't know. It's weird because, and this is the problem I have with like self-help gurus in general, is they use really vague advice that would probably help people that are like not to sound offensive, but people who have hit the bottom, right? And like, oh, I need anything, I'm freaking out. And if people could just follow those, then yeah, your life will probably suck less. But I mean, those kind of ideas that they throw out, those little nuggets of self-help here and there, like it's only going to help that one little thing for a little bit. Like you can't build yourself, and they make all those promises like, oh, you could be the next Elon Musk, you could be the next, fitness superstar if you just wake up at 7 a.m. every day and keep a sleep schedule. Like, that's not how that works. They're probably never going to be that person, and it's okay.
Make sure you get a full night's rest. Get
Oh,
up,
yeah.
have your avocado toast.
Drink
Fine.
water, and you'll become Bill Gates.
Oh, water. Apparently, water is the miracle. Like, you
Right.
can do anything if you drink water. I'm being fishy.
Darn it! I was buying it. You should have wrote a book. We got Tony Robbins over here. Come on.
I mean, water is great.
Oh yeah, it's. I mean,
So
it's required to live.
Remember,
So.
I said it. Water is great.
Yeah. That's the catchphrase for the podcast now. Water is great. That's my big water.
Salt and tonic. Water's great.
Yeah. See if your job can sponsor the show, Get an affiliation link.
That would be interesting.
Oh yeah. You'd be water guy.
I'd
You'd be
water.
like Adam Sandler, but you could do like a public speaking engagements.
I don't like being compared to Adam Sandler.
I'm sorry.
Okay. It's fine.
It's all right.
There are worse things.
Oh yeah. A little bit.
Yeah, you could have said like Pat Robertson or something. I don't know.
Oh no. Yeah. You're not dying yet, so it's good.
No, I'm not.
The guy's in a eternal state of I'm pretty sure he's gonna die next week.
Really, I'm amazed he's still going.
Yeah, crazy.
It's really kind of a toss-up. Is it going to be him, the Queen, or Betty White?
Betty White can't die.
She can't die.
No, I don't think she can.
She will go
her like 98th or 99th birthday recently or something like that.
Yesterday, I think it was her 99th birthday. Yeah.
That's nuts.
Why do I know that?
Yeah, I know. It's weird side information we all absorb.
Are you social media?
Exactly. All right.
Social media. You're also the co-host of a live show on Sundays, aren't you?
Yes, sometimes. Mostly.
You guys are doing that.
Two of them, I think. And
you guys do that weekly, right?
Yep. We had a accidental hiatus over Christmas and New Year's, where my sleep was still messed up and I was waking up at like 10 or 11 a.m. on Sundays and missing it. And it was my turn to do the show. And so we're like, okay, well, I guess it's Christmas break because we missed 2 in a row. Let's go for 3 and make it real, So, but yeah, I co-host a show called Religion Zero. It's me and 2 of my good friends, Amos Joseph and Brooke Potter. And we're all from different necks of the woods and kind of different spiritual backgrounds. And we've all come to the same conclusion that pretty much all organized religion is ass. And we kind of deep dive all of the things most, normie Christians believe and why they're wrong and dumb to believe that. It's a lot of deconstructionism, if you will, trying to get to the roots and the basics. And that's where the term Religion Zero comes from, was like, what actually is the basis of religion and what is all this weird, crazy added dogma that we added to it? And let's trim that fat. Right. So that was kind of the original idea, is realizing, modern religion and modern church structure. We do talk about other religions occasionally, but we're all back from, Christian ministry in different fields. So that's kind of our go-to, but we do have some episodes on other religions. Like one of my good friends of mine is named Craig. Online, he's Abu American, and he's one of the up and coming Islamic influencers. And he talks a lot about like modern Islam culture. He talks a lot about polygamy, like how to deal with multiple women and stuff, because they still practice that. You can have up to 4 wives, even in modern Islam. It's not like an old thing, you know, like Mormon or anything like that. They still do it, and they're still pretty proud of it. So,
is that across the board? Because when
for the most part,
when I was in when I was living in Amman, Jordan for a summer internship, there were laws that allowed for men to have up to 4 wives, and I thought maybe that was just a state law, but I wasn't sure if that was actually like directly related to Islam.
Yeah.
That's
So,
interesting. I didn't know that.
yeah, old school Islam, there was no number, and then they made it 4, you know, with their version of the whole Pope and Cardinals kind of thing, just so it'd be kind of fair to everyone, because they didn't want one guy having 600 and one person having 0 or 1 kind of
I know
thing.
they also put in place like laws for like you have to be able to equally provide like for all of them.
Yeah.
So
So if you wanted 100 wives, you would have to be stupid rich. Yeah. So
yeah,
they also limited that so it's more acceptable or more obtainable, I guess, for that word. But yeah, you still have to treat all your wives equal, even if one's the first wife or versus the 4th wife. You still have to give them access to resources equally and attention and all that. So it's pretty interesting, and it's honestly, I don't see what the big deal is. I think it's cool. If that's what floats your boat, you know, let that boat float.
So you guys talk about a wide variety of things.
Oh yeah. Our most recent podcast, we talked about dominion theology and theocracies. Um, there's a lot of movement still, and it's not necessarily in America. There's some in America, but in general, it's that idea that Christians should be in charge of all governments and the world would be better. If we use Christian principles and Christians for every president and king and queen and prime minister, then the world would be a better place. And we were talking about why that's silly.
Interestingly enough, that was kind of sort of along the lines of what Ryan and I talked about the other day.
Mhm.
Yeah, that we're not going there right now.
Okay.
So,
Part two.
part 2 next time on Soul and Out. So deconstruction.
Mhm.
Uh, how would you define deconstruction in this aspect?
Well, usually it's a lot like construction, but reverse. You give it
Oh,
that Uno reverse, right? Yeah.
okay. Mhm.
Deconstruction, to me at least, I don't know if my other co-hosts and panelists would use this exact definition, but to me, it's kind of getting back down to the, you know, the bare bones, the brass tacks of what are we actually talking about here? Because, you know, over time, you know, you can see it with government, you can see it with really every organization. It starts with a small set of rules, and then they slowly build on it over time, you know,
Mhm.
until it's completely unmanageable and all these weird things contradict themselves, and you pigeon your hole over here and over here, and it just makes life crazy. Like in general, laws increase; they don't decrease, right? As a general nature of organization. So to me, deconstructionism is starting to cut the fat again and start cutting out those dumb laws that don't make any sense and don't have any real backing or purpose anymore, right?
Yeah,
And it's
yeah.
like, what was the point? You know, trying to go back to the point, deconstruct it back all to our essentials, and stop worrying about all the bureaucracy that we've created on ourselves. Yeah.
So you make that sound extremely easy.
Oh no, yeah. It's definitely not a button push. It's a lot of thought and a lot of debates and arguments with yourself and others. Um, and it's a pretty big mindset switch where you're kind of, from what I've noticed, the people who do this, or at least are willing to go through it, their lives change pretty dramatically. You gain friends, you lose friends, you gain family, you lose family.
Yeah,
You can
yeah,
lose whole social structures because they're not ready to do that. They're not ready to go under the scalpel of their beliefs, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah. Oh
and
man.
so once you start doing that, like you're not trying to cut ties, but ties eventually are going to get cut. That's just
Yeah.
unfortunately part of the deal. And I think that's what makes it hard for a lot of people is they prefer belonging to enlightenment, I guess, if that makes sense. I don't know if
Mhm.
that's the right word to use, but I used it.
Yeah, I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Like to me, it's kind of like a semi-Gnosticism, like
Hmm.
that there are those who believe that they have found truth and that they're in the truth, and the truth has to be the truth, or else there is no truth. And uh, and if they're not inside of that specific truth, they're also not going to heaven. So for a lot of people, um, my transition out of mainstream evangelicalism, uh, to them it felt like me completely leaving Christianity, to the point where I don't think I can get through a conversation with my mother without her asking me if I'm still a Christian.
Hmm.
But uh,
Yeah.
because there's this, I don't know, that clinging to this set structure that someone has built up into these mindsets and beliefs that they've like structured their world around. And yeah, that is not a button push to get out of.
Hmm.
Uh, I think the hardest part for me has been the anxiety, because well, what if I'm wrong about being wrong? you know, so I've come to the conclusion that everything I was believing was wrong. But what if I'm wrong about that? And
Hmm.
you know,
Yeah.
s- I think that's part of it for me, has been there's so much of my salvation and my standing with God being uh, systematically connected to that former system of beliefs and rules and um, uh, creed, that it's hard for me to separate the two, because it feels like I'm taking on dangerous territory, like I'm trying to
Hmm.
walk on water without a boat. It's
Yeah.
uh, it's been kind of crazy. So
Hmm.
has your experience been similar, or is there something else that has stood out to you with this deconstruction in your life that's been, that stands out as being like,
Yeah.
cool.
I think a lot of it comes down to me, like, how attached am I to everything, right? Because a lot of times people will believe something that's inherently like false, but they're attached to it, right? It's almost
Sure.
like an umbilical cord, right? And they're like, well, if I lose that, then I lose all of this that comes with it, right? If
Yeah.
you're and it's something interesting because that's something both like Eastern philosophy and I think early Christians both understood is like in general, like attachments cause way more suffering than they do benefit, but it stings to cut it, right? And
Yeah.
that's where a lot of people go is, oh, I don't want to injure myself, right? I don't want to lose all this, right? And it's kind of that hoarding mentality a lot of people have, and nesting and being comfortable, and all of those pack rat people, they're doing that, but just emotionally, right? I don't want to let go of this stuff because it has memories, it has meaning, it has these people in my lives. Even if we all believe the wrong thing and we're all dumb, at least we're dumb together, right? And I think, going back and talking about my weird family tree, excuse me, that all kind of came into play too, of realizing, like, I mean, if I have three moms and five dads now that are all, weird, vaguely related to each other legally, like, who really is an authority figure, right?
Yeah.
Do I have to
Yeah.
listen to all of them equally, even if they contradict themselves? Right.
What do you do in a patriarchal society when you have five patriarchs in your family?
Exactly. You learn that I'm going to be my own. Right. That's kind of the conclusion I came to.
Oh, that is so interesting. Uh, so would you say that you started the whole process of deconstruction rather early, or was there kind of a set moment or something that you kind of pinpoint as being the starting point?
um, yeah. So, I mean, I think I could answer that in like two parts. So, yeah, I think in general, I had questioned authority a lot as a kid. And like, I kind of realized how pointless public school was. I kind of realized how pointless a lot of like being in social cliques and being in like these, hang out with these kids at the the lunch table at school. People have all of those attachments and like, team thinking kind of thing.
Sure.
So I feel like when I was young, because my parents and my family is so diverse, I kind of realized like, oh, first of all, the nuclear family doesn't really mean anything. In addition to it, I'd maybe go into other things like this teacher. Like I had a teacher in high school that taught Bible class, and I studied the Bible more than him. So it felt weird that like I could catch him saying dumb stuff and teaching it to other people that was like factually inaccurate. But like I'm the student, so therefore I'm not allowed to question it. And I realized all of that's dumb. So I kind of rejected or at least questioned authority pretty darn early because I've had so many contradicting voices claiming to be the authority that are all wrong. Right. And so the whole listen to your parents, they know what's best for you, that illusion died pretty quick. Right. Especially when you have multiple parents to get examples of them messing up. So, so
Yeah,
I think that's that. Yeah.
I think if I had more of that kind of a situation growing up, I probably would have had an earlier start to my journey.
Yeah.
But since I only had my mom and my dad in a pretty, cut off family, that was very much like, what happens in the family stays in the family. We don't talk about family stuff outside the family. And yeah, I think having that lock in probably delayed me a bit. I could see how for you that would definitely have some sort of impact or like guiding like to question stuff. Be like, okay, what the is going on?
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And so, yeah, so that I realized the problem. I would say that phase, I realized there was a problem, but I didn't have any solutions. So I kind of just became your stereotypical lazy teenager where I would do the bare minimum at school. I would do the bare minimum of parental obedience and chores. And then I would just go research my own shit and do whatever I want and, just sit in my room and check out the internet all day. And I was a pretty early adopter of researching on the internet, I would say. Like 2003 to 2006. That's before social media and MySpace was cool, right? It was just barely at the cusp of that. So I was already online researching stuff left and right, from our own amusement. I was a little bit ahead of the game on that, I think. And it helped me, adopt and understand and absorb different perspectives and philosophies and theologies and like, oh, not everybody is a Baptist in the world. Not everybody comes from these backgrounds. Not everybody went to these types of schools and lived in these environments, right?
Yeah.
And so so that what I like doubled down on, okay, the life that people are telling me right now isn't the only life, right? And so I could have just accepted that. I was like, okay, well, everything sucks. What are you going to do about it? I'm just going to sit home and do my thing, right? And then the other pivotal moment where I feel like I found a solution, and it's going to get a little bit weird, so I'll have to explain myself very succinctly because you could take wrong things from that. But I learned the solution, so to speak, when I went to an internship in 2010. I worked at a bilingual Hispanic church, and it was an internship, and we worked every day of the week, and we lived at the church, and we actually lived in a barn. They didn't have heating, and the doors, there was no doors or anything like that. Your bedroom was a closet in the corner with a shower curtain on it, filled to the brim with spiders, mice, rats, you name it. Like it wasn't, humans weren't supposed to live there, and they made us live there to save money, right? So but I learned a lot through that program because I realized how much a human can adapt and take, because that became normal. I was there for a year and a half. That was normal, right?
You did that for a year and a half?
Yeah. I lived in Colorado in a non-heated barn storage area,
buddy.
with
I could do
7
that.
other people. Yeah, well, yeah. I didn't think I could either, but I did it, right? That's the crazy part.
I mean, if I had to.
Yeah, and like we could have bowed out every time. We could have just, because I had my car there, I could have got up and quit and left whenever. They weren't paying us. It was an internship, and I just realized how much a human could actually do and put up with. And I've thought of that as a good thing and as a bad thing, because you can see how much everybody else is putting up with when they don't have to. But also, if you really want to do something, you're surprised how much your body and your mind can take, and what can become normal, right? And then I had that experience of the actual living situation mixed with my role in that program. So I was, the internship, which is basically the unpaid slave. We both know that experience pretty well.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we
Oh
shared an internship very similar. Thankfully, we had heat, but other than that, it was pretty similar. And so
yeah,
this one was actually the
yeah,
first.
resembled internet.
Yeah, yeah. It would refresh a lot, but at least it had the option to refresh, right?
Right.
Uh,
Once in a blue moon, I could get something.
oh yeah, yeah. It was funny because I actually to that internship we shared, I brought a giant TV and a PlayStation with all the Netflix and stuff, and then I realized you can't really use that. You can't,
Yeah,
now it's all just really big decorations, right?
you learned a little too late.
Yeah, all of that was irrelevant. But yeah, at this internship, I was the one of the internship whipping boys, bottom of the barrel. We were janitors. We were also youth pastors. We also did food banks and donations. We did all the lawn care for free for the entire, like 6 acre in the middle of nowhere bilingual church. So we did everything. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and but my boss was the first time in my like me and him, we disagreed a lot theologically. And this is already about the time where I already was able to question authority, and I didn't really respect all adults as being better than me. And so we would still argue and disagree and all that stuff, but he would still compliment me and still give me like praise and still tell me how good of a job I'm doing in the midst of us arguing and getting mad at each other, if that makes sense. And
Yeah.
I realized that, like, to me, that was more of the solution. This is the part where I have to weird, but the solution is living in the system anyway, even if you disagree with it, in order to further real goals, if that makes sense.
Sure.
And the word I used to always use originally is manipulation or shrewdness. And those words are usually innately negative words. And I think we've had this conversation before. Like, is manipulation like a mean word or not? Um, and like in the Bible, there's two different times it talks about shrewdness, and it talks about it as good things that Christians should do. And
Yeah.
it took me a lot to absorb that idea. And I think the mixture of being disconnected or untethered from worldly common comforts, and associations and ideologies, in addition to understanding what it means to be Christian shrewd, to me, has kind of been my recipe for success, so to speak.
Yeah, because even Jesus even uses a parable where he depicts God as being shrewd, the shrewd uh, business owner.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the good guy is the one that stole from his father to give to his father's friends, or like the person he was paying for, like his boss. He was about to get fired, and so he took some of his boss's money and started paying off debts for all of his friends. And God rewarded his shrewdness. Even though if you read that story and say it wasn't from parable, everybody like that's evil. Why would you reward that?
I don't remember that story.
Yeah, the
But
parable of the shrewd manager. Yeah, the shrewd manager.
I was
Um,
thinking of the three servants who went invested in and like buried the gold,
yeah,
and it goes back and talks about him being the shrewd manager. It's like I know you're a shrewd man, and
yeah,
uh,
exactly.
oh my gosh,
Yeah,
yeah,
they both have similar goals. But yeah, if
I'm getting
you read that
excited.
story not realizing it was in the Bible, if you read that story not realizing it's in the Bible, you'd be like, "Oh, that guy's messed up." But God
Right,
rewarded
yeah.
the guy you
What
thought was
what
messed
chapter of Machiavelli is that?
up. Exactly. And so, to me, that kind of opened my eyes and realized, and the other one that's more popular is be gentle as doves, but be as shrewd as vipers.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like
I
God's
quote that one.
asking us to play the game, even though we know it's a bad game, right? That's how I've taken that. Don't go outwards and like start beating people up and harassing people, but you can play the game pretty shrewdly, right? And to me, that's those are kind of the 2 points of my life: rejecting authority really early on, and then also learning about being shrewdness and like you could still play the game and still be a good Christian, so to speak, right? And
Yeah,
we're actually motivated to play the game. So it's very interesting. And so those are kind of like my two big philosophies that kind of get put into everything. It goes into my show with deconstructionism, and talking to people of other faiths and beliefs and trying to, nitpick what's the real issue here kind of thing. In my jobs, like I work in a very secular job in social work, and
yeah.
uh, being able, like, most of therapy and that counseling kind of thing is actually a lot of like shrewd car salesman tactics, We just don't call it that because it sounds bad. But that's what a lot of it is you're instead of selling a used car, you're trying to sell them change, and try to point them in that direction every day. That in itself is a shrewd manipulation, isn't it? And I use a lot of car salesman tactics to help get people to realize change is good. Yeah.
uh, and to be fair, a lot of what pastors do is
Mhm.
manipulative or shrewd,
Yeah.
trying to convince people of certain moral beliefs or actions or tithing.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Uh, so how do you think that plays out in your life now? How does that impact your, I don't know, how you engage with Christianity, with God, with the world overall?
Ooh, that's a big question. It's a
It is
big
a big
ask.
question.
Yeah.
I know it's a big question. It's just the one that popped in my head because, well, it was a natural question.
Mhm. I think I think it makes me feel more free and actually less anxious about a lot of things,
Okay.
especially if you are a Christian and believe, the Bible. You don't have to be sola scriptura because I'm starting to wane from that more and more the more I think about it.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's a bad word to say, in most Christian circles is sola scriptura.
I yeah, in fact, one of my professors recently had implied that I was super liberal because I was questioning something in terms of like psychology and like integration with Christianity, and saying like, well, when it comes to these specific things and interpretations and stuff, and trying to look at it like literalistically, like you really can't. And when we're talking about infallibility, there's a lot of loaded stuff there,
Mhm,
and there's a lot of questions there, and he was just kind of like, oh yeah, there's not a whole lot of, you know there's some liberal Christians that question the infallibility of the Bible, and I'm like, I think there's some non-liberals that kind of do too. um in
mhm,
terms of like the real questions in philosophy, like why are we saying these things and what are we meaning when we say these things?
mhm.
Because William Jennings Bryan, back in, oh my goodness, the, what was it, the 50s or 60s, maybe even 70s, I lose track of timelines, was very much about the infallibility of the Bible, but he would also say that someone who believed in a literal 6-day creation was of low intelligence. uh, and so like like the way that we look at the infallibility of the Bible has multiple different, like even just like, you can get 5 people who all agree that the Bible is inerrant, but they'll all say completely different things about what the Bible means. And so like there's all this different stuff that's like, it's exhausting. It's like,
Mm.
yeah, there's, I don't know, there is a bit of a taboo there now in society that I
Yeah.
feel like shouldn't be there. I guess that's what you're talking about, is like the
Yeah.
whole laws building up, or like rules building upon each other
Mhm.
to create fundamentalism.
Yeah. And like I think a big part of that is realizing it's gonna happen. We're not gonna be able to fight the system. It's learning to be okay with everyone else believes dumb shit, right? At the end of the day. I don't know how you feel about cussing in the podcast, but
Oh, I don't
okay. Yeah.
care.
But you gotta realize, like, to me, there's a big difference between a descriptive truth and a prescriptive truth. And this is a big thing I talk about a lot. Sometimes we talk about it on our Religion Zero show, sometimes solo or just in conversations. But, descriptive truth is something that just describes something happening. Like that cat is walking outside, right? It's not telling you to do something about it, right?
Yeah.
It's just describing what's happening. A common one I talk about is a common descriptive truth is reading the instruction manual on how to play chess or a board game. It's just what it is. It's not saying, oh, the bishop's going to move diagonal, and that's a bad thing. We need to fix it. It's saying, nope, bishops move diagonal. That's just the way it is, right? It's not adhering to this is a good thing or a bad thing, and we need to fix it. Prescriptive truth is when you are applying something, you want something to happen. Um, And so prescriptive truth would be like, hey, doing this opening in chess has been useful for me, right? You're applying a good or a bad to it. You're applying an action to that knowledge,
Yeah.
right? So they're implying, hey, you should try this. It works for me. So different strategies of how you play chess is prescriptive, but
Mm-hmm.
the rules of chess are descriptive. And I
Mm,
think those two distinctions are something a lot of people forget a lot. And so,
yeah.
I mean, for that example that we were just using, the longer something exists, the more rules and bureaucracy are going to get added to it. I'm not saying, okay, destroy the system. It's, well, that's just what happens, right? There's also a common phrase that gets thrown a lot in my side of the internet of talking about there's a formula called diversity plus proximity equals war. And that's just a formula of something that just usually happens throughout human history. It's not saying it's a good thing or it's a bad thing. Oh, you should stop doing this. Oh, you should start doing this. It's just pointing out this is what happens. So, do you want this to happen or not want it to happen? That's up to you, right? Just get, same thing with the rules of chess. The queen does this, castling looks like this, pawns move this way. Like, if you don't like that or don't like that, that's up to you. But that's just the way it is. And so, I think, especially when you're reading like news headlines and reading other people's social media accounts or other things like that, it's really good to have that filter is, are they talking descriptively or prescriptively, right? And
Mm.
just kind of having that filter in your brain and trying to realize, what are they trying to tell me right now, right? Are they trying to tell me to do something with this info, or is it just info, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, I don't remember how I got on that rant, but it's a good rant, and I'm glad it came out.
I am too. Uh, I think that's kind of a defining factor for a lot of news media these days is the difference of being descriptive versus prescriptive. Uh,
Mhm,
because everything's being sold in a prescriptive kind of manner. They're not really talking about objective or descriptive truth of this is this, this, and this. It's kind of spinning it off that there's some sort of moral code or agenda or something else attached to
mhm,
something more than what there actually is. So, and
mhm,
I can see how like that has happened a lot within Christianity over the years, which
mhm,
is why we have so many different denominations now. When we have things that are just split off, and it's gotten just absolutely insane. I am, I've said it before, and I'll say it again. The Southern Baptist Church or Southern Baptist Convention, specifically, um, should not exist anymore. The only reason it started was because the Baptist church split into two over the issue of whether or not missionaries could own slaves. And surprise, the Southern Baptist Convention was for it.
yeah,
Spoilers if you haven't read on the Civil War yet. But the the reality is like that was a proponent for why they split off from the rest of the Baptist church. Well, that's a non-issue anymore. We've accepted the morality of it. We've talked it out. It's illegal. It's wrong. Why do you still exist? Why haven't you just gone back into your pod? Come together,
yeah,
and it comes down to that. That um, feeling like they're right,
mhm,
and that building up of rules and laws and all this other stuff that just keeps
yeah,
splitting people apart. So I can see how there's I don't know, there's a bit of a freedom to tearing down some of those extra rules, like
yeah,
taking the time to start shifting them down.
yeah. And I think that's the tricky part too, is because there's a difference between burning down all the rules for everyone and you choosing not to accept them, right? And I
Yeah,
think that's a hard battle, and that kind of goes into what I was talking about before with like dominion theology and theocracies. Is they want to burn down some rules and force some other rules on others, and as soon as you're putting your mindset on someone else, that's the diversity plus proximity equals war scenario, right? You're
gotcha.
having a high diversity all packed together. Eventually, someone's going to start throwing hands, right? either either literally or at least metaphorically. And that's when you start talking about people talking about cessations and things like that and splitting off and making your own church,
Yeah,
right? That all happens because you started getting a big diverse group all really close to each other. Eventually there's going to be some form of cut and problem, right? And I think you yourself as an individual being able to realize okay, I don't need these, versus saying, hey, all of you are wrong and I'm going to make you right. Those are very big. Like one of those is a self-freeing and the other one is a fight, right?
Yeah.
And so I think I've seen both sides of the aisle, always get stuck in that, oh, we need to force them to do something. Oh, no, you're wrong. We need to force you to do something. And it's just this back and forth, throwing shots at each other and realizing, hey, what if everyone's wrong? Right?
Well, that sounds like one of the real dangers of deconstruction, where it's like, because I know for me, I had to be very careful to not get in this place where I became theologically combative with people, where it's like, okay, I've exited out of this. I've recognized that what we were saying and believing was false. So I need to try and make them see the same truth, right?
Yeah.
Uh, and
The key there is make them. That's
yeah,
that's the hard problem.
uh, yeah. um, I think that has I don't know. I think that's a big cultural thing that we have. Um,
Mhm.
maybe it's a human thing that we have. It's just kind of want to push it on people.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's actually a really good book I'm reading right now or listening to because it's on Audible, called The Righteous Mind by Jonathan Haidt. And it
Mm,
talks about why two people who feel like they have the moral, not necessarily superiority, but like the moral position, and why two people that you would understand as like good people, why do they still fight each other, right?
yeah.
And it's really cool. It goes into a lot of science experiments they did. It goes into a lot of those things, and the conclusion it really came down to is morality is not rational, right?
Hmm.
Uh, you can't really think your way into being morally correct. A lot of morality is gut feelings of what's right and wrong. And the example he posed is your rationality is a man riding an emotional elephant. So if you're riding an elephant and your rationality and your emotions contradict, the elephant is going to win, right?
Yeah.
Uh, you can't force the elephant unless you guys are already in sync about something. But there's no way in hell a man riding an elephant can make the elephant really do anything, right? If the elephant wants to go left and you want to go right, you're going where the elephant goes, right? And he uses the analogy of that gut feeling of what's right and what's wrong. And like both people can have good rational arguments for why this is a good thing or why this is a bad thing or vice versa. But the problem is when you conflict and you try to change the other person's side, your human is trying to fight their elephant and vice versa, right?
Mm.
It's a losing battle. It's a lot of learning to just be okay with like morality is not necessarily subjective, but it's at least relative, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Uh, one of the good examples he used is he would give out weird, vaguely moral hypothetical scenarios and then do polls on people what their answer is. One of my favorite ones he uses a lot in the book is, let's say there's a family and they see out on the side of the road there's a dead dog that got hit by a car. So they bring it inside and they eat it to save money. Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Puppy.
Is your instinct that was a bad thing?
It would have been. I think
Yeah.
if you had asked me like several years ago,
Yeah.
but there's that part of me like, no.
Yeah. Because they're trying to be
Bad.
economical, they're trying to be ecological, trying to use resources efficiently and all that stuff. But there's still that gut feeling of that was someone's dog, right?
Yeah. Well,
And
there's
so there's two conflicting gut
puppy
feelings.
stuff. I mean, it's
Yeah.
really just an empathetic response
Yeah. Mhm.
because puppies are cute.
Yeah,
Well, most of them are.
exactly. Well,
Wait,
bunnies are cute
what
too, and I love me some
kind
rabbits.
of dog?
It doesn't
Just-
it doesn't matter. And what he would do is he would give people's gut reaction to that. Oh, that was a bad thing or that was a good thing. And then you would add more context. Well, actually, like if somebody said, okay, that's a big thing. Well, actually, it was the son's dog he got for Christmas. Does that make it better or worse?
it makes it sadder.
Yeah. And then he would add another one. Actually, it was the son's idea to do it in memory of his dog that he would still help the family.
Oh,
Do you see all these weird conflicting gut movements?
I don't know where you get these scenarios.
Yeah.
I don't want to know.
Yeah, but I mean, in general, most moral things are those kind of weird. Most morality things are vague, and not a lot of people agree on them, right? So even two people could be two upstanding citizens, but still horrendously disagree on that question or similar vague questions, right? And so that's what that book goes into: is why do people who feel like they're doing something moral, they're not actively trying to be the bad guy, how can they like conflict and get mad at each other so much over moral issues?
Yeah.
Yeah, great book. I recommend everyone read it. Yeah.
It's gonna take me a while to wrap my mind around some of that because now I'm thinking like other moral situations. I'm like, oh yeah, context is king.
Yeah.
For like everything.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man. All right. Well, to wrap up, Corey. Final thoughts / one random piece of advice.
Ooh, final thoughts. I would say, I guess going with the whole theme of thing is always learn to think for yourself first before you adhere to an ideology, I guess is how I would put a good summary of what everything I kind of believe in what we're talking about is it's okay to question things. Like that's a healthy behavior is to question things. Even if you want to question, not just your parents or yourself or your life, but like if you're questioning God and having doubts and stuff like that, that's okay. Like just play it through, don't burden yourself with all the anxiety of the what if scenarios. Just it's a lot of thinking about in this present moment, what's going on, right? And a group of an advice that I would recommend to everyone, especially Christians, because a lot of this is one of those things that a lot of people think is no. Christians, I would highly encourage to read the 48 Laws of Power. That's one of those banned prison books because a lot of criminals read it. But I think it would be very beneficial for Christians to read it as too. It tells a lot of like the nature of power, and a lot of power is based on options and information control and how people use that throughout history and in modern day in order to acquire power. And so a lot of people read that to make themselves powerful, but you can also read it to see when someone's trying to do that to you, right? And it's kind of a tools and tactics of the trade of who has an upper hand in any given scenario. And if you are, going through a similar journey as me where you're trying to detach from old beliefs or old ideologies and trying to like relearn things and question things, that's good. But you also need to still realize like, what is everyone else doing, right? I think that's a very example. If you want to play that game, right, and I feel like Christ, when he talks about shrewdness, is encouraging us to play the game, but not to like throw people under the bus. But you should still play the game. You need to realize how people are playing the game, right? And so it's a very unpopular Christian opinion to tell people to read 48 Laws of Power, the criminal book, but I would highly encourage it.
Along those lines, I would also add on The Prince by Niccolo Machiavelli.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of similar concepts.
For sure.
All right. Well, Corey, thank you so much for being on today. For anyone who would like to follow Corey on Twitter, you can go over to Vanguard_conk and give him a follow, send him some love. If you enjoyed this episode, please feel free to like and subscribe. Ring that bell if you so please. And we will see you guys next time. Bye.
Shout out to Harambe.
Peace. Harambe.
Harambe.